Gabrielle Coco Chanel was born on August 19, 1883, in Saumur, France. Raised in poverty, she spent much of her youth in a Catholic orphanage after her mother died when Chanel was 12 years old. It was there that she learned to sew, a skill that would later define her career. Chanel began her professional life as a cabaret singer and adopted the nickname Coco during this time. By her early 20s, she had transitioned into fashion, first designing hats and later expanding into clothing. Her designs challenged the era's restrictive fashion norms, favoring simplicity, comfort, and elegance over the extravagant and rigid styles of the early 20th century. Chanel's legendary creation of the little black dress, the Chanel suit, and her iconic No. 5 perfume cemented her place in fashion history. Chanel herself designed her famed interlock CC monogram, which has been in use since the 1920s. Chanel had several wealthy lovers, including Captain Arthur Edward Capel, a prominent member of the British upper class, who financed her first shop. It is said that Chanel, inspired by Arthur's toiletry bottles and whiskey decanter, created the beveled glass design for the bottle of her iconic No. 5 perfume. In the early days of her business, Chanel was also supported by her sister Antoinette and her aunt Adrienne. Among her many lovers were Russian composer Igor Stravinsky and Russian Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich Romanov. In 1923, Chanel was introduced into British high society, where she mingled with the aristocracy, including Edward Prince of Wales, Winston Churchill, and Hugh Grosvenor, the Duke of Westminster, who was said to be one of the wealthiest men in the world. Coco Chanel's rise in the fashion world was meteoric. By the 1920s, she had revolutionized women's fashion, introducing a modernist and minimalist approach that was groundbreaking for the time. Her designs appealed to the liberated post-World War I woman, emphasizing ease and luxury in place of the corseted and embellished fashions that had previously dominated. Her first successful business venture was a millinery shop, which she expanded into a fashion house. In 1921, she launched Chanel No. 5, a perfume that became synonymous with luxury. She enlisted the help of Ernest Beau, a Russian perfumer who after considerable research presented to Chanel 6 vials of scent selected from the 80 samples he had developed. The samples were labeled 1 to 6. Chanel chose the sample in vial No. 5 and decided to call her new perfume Chanel No. 5. Over the following decades, Coco Chanel built a global brand that continues to be influential to this day. In 1922, Théophile Bader, founder of Paris Galerie Lafayette, introduced Coco Chanel to businessman Pierre Wertheimer, aiming to sell Chanel No. 5 in his store. By 1924, Chanel partnered with the Wertheimer brothers, who fully financed the production, marketing, and distribution of Chanel No. 5 through Parfum Chanel. The Wertheimers received 70% of the profits, Bader 20%, and Chanel, with 10%, licensed her name and withdrew from operations. Dissatisfied, Chanel spent over 20 years trying to regain full control, calling Pierre Wertheimer, "the bandit who screwed me." Coco Chanel's legacy is not without controversy. During World War II, Chanel's relationship with the Nazi regime came under scrutiny. By the time Germany occupied France in 1940, Chanel had closed her fashion house, claiming that the war was no time for fashion. She moved into the Ritz Hotel in Paris, which was also used by many high-ranking Nazi officers during the occupation. It was during this time that Chanel became romantically involved with Hans Günther von Dinklage, a Nazi officer and spy. This relationship raised suspicions about her loyalty to France, and there were allegations that she acted as an informant for the Nazis. Chanel's wartime activities were kept mostly under wraps for years, but evidence emerged over time suggesting that she was not just an apolitical figure trying to survive the war. In 2011, Hal Vaughn's book Sleeping with the Enemy, Coco Chanel's Secret War, brought these allegations to light. The book reveals documents from French and German archives suggesting that Chanel worked as an agent for the Nazi military intelligence unit, the Abwehr. According to Vaughan, Chanel was known as Agent F-7124, codenamed Westminster, after one of her former lovers, the Duke of Westminster. Chanel allegedly undertook missions on behalf of the Nazis, including efforts to broker peace negotiations between Nazi Germany and Britain. Chanel's complicity with the Nazi regime was further complicated by her efforts to use Nazi anti-Jewish laws to regain control of her perfume company, Parfum Chanel, which had been sold to the Wertheimer family, a Jewish family. However, the Wertheimers, anticipating Chanel's moves, had transferred the company to a non-Jewish associate before the occupation, which thwarted Chanel's attempts. Following the liberation of France in 1944, Chanel was arrested by the Free French Purge Committee, which was responsible for interrogating suspected collaborators. However, she was released without charges, likely due to the intervention of her powerful friends, including Winston Churchill, with whom she had a close relationship. Chanel's wartime activities were largely forgotten in the post-war years, and she eventually returned to the fashion world in 1954, relaunching her couture house at the age of 71. Despite her controversial past, Chanel continued to be celebrated as a fashion icon until her death on January 10, 1971. Coco Chanel's legacy is one of contrast and contradiction. On one hand, she is remembered as one of the most influential fashion designers of the 20th century, a visionary who reshaped women's fashion. On the other hand, her alleged collaboration with the Nazis has cast a shadow over her reputation. Despite the controversy, the Chanel brand remains synonymous with elegance and luxury, continuing to thrive long after her death. The duality of Chanel's life, from her humble beginnings and rise to fame, to her alleged wartime activities and the continued success of her brand, reflects the complex nature of history. While she may have played a significant role in shaping modern fashion, the revelations of her wartime conduct continue to provoke debate about how her legacy should be remembered.